my darlings, how's it going? My name is Craig and welcome to a Gem Knight deck profile. So I've looked around YouTube quite a bit and I don't really see any, up-to-date, good, decent Gem Knight deck profiles being posted. So I figured I would finally get mine out there. I've been meaning to do this for so long now, but I just haven't had the chance to sit down and do it. I really hope you guys enjoy the deck profile. I don't really have a whole lot else to say, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with, the actual deck profile of all the ratios and cards, and then we'll move on to the explanation segment where I explain all of my choices, as per usual. So without further ado, let's get started. We have 3 Gem Armadillo, 3 Gem Knight Obsidian, 3 Gem Knight Lazuli, 2 Gem Knight Garnet, 2 Gem Knight Tourmaline, 1 Gem Knight Sapphire, and for the last vanilla we have 1 Gem Knight Lapis. That's it for the Gem Knights. For the rest of the monsters we have 3 Denko Sekka, 1 Glow Up Bulb, and finally 1 Maxi. So let's move on to spells. For the spells we have 3 Gem Knight Fusion, 3 Brilliant Fusion, 3 Absorb Fusion, 3 White Elephant's Gift, 2 Pot of Desires, 1 Upstart Goblin, 1 One Day of Peace, 1 1-for-1, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Twin Twisters, and finally 1 Raigeki to round off the main deck. So moving on to the extra deck, we have 1 Gem Knight Lady Brilliant Diamond, 1 Master Diamond, 1 Zirconia, 2 Prismora, 1 Citrine, 1 Amethyst, 1 Ruby, 1 Topaz, 1 Aquamarine, 1 Lady Lapis Lazuli, and finally 1 Seraphonite to round off the Gem Knights. For the rest of the extra deck, we have 1 Castell, 1 Naturia Beast, and 1 Naturia Barkion. That's it for the extra deck, so let's move on to the explanation segment. So I figured we would start out the explanation segment with just kind of explaining what makes this deck so good at fusion summoning, since I figured not a whole lot of you would be completely familiar with the deck. So first of all, let's start out with the main fusion spell card, Gem Knight Fusion. If you're not familiar with it, it's essentially just a basic fusion spell card, right? It lets you use materials in your hand or on the field for the fusion summon of a Gem Knight Fusion monster. But what makes this card so good is that you can banish any Gem Knight from your graveyard to add this from grave back to hand. And you can do that as many times as you want. It's not a once per turn. Meaning that once you have access to one of these, you can just keep getting it back over and over again. So that alone means that we have essentially just an unlimited access to this card, so we can keep fusion summoning with it. But what makes this deck even better is that we have Obsidian and Lazuli. Now, when you're making a fusion summon in this deck, 99% of the time, one of these are going to be a material for that fusion summon. So Lazuli, if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can target a normal monster in your graveyard and add it back to hand. Obsidian, if it's sent from your hand to the graveyard, you can target a level 4 or lower normal monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So essentially, when you use a normal monster with one of these two for a fusion summon, which you almost always will, you're going to be getting 3 cards back from using 3 cards. So how it's going to work is that you're going to fusion summon, you're going to use your 2 materials, so your normal monster and your Obsidian or Lazuli, they go to grave, and you get your fusion monster. So you've just used up 3 cards for 1 monster. However, you then get your Obsidian or Lazuli's effect to get back your vanilla, whether it be adding it back to hand or special summoning it, and we can then banish the Obsidian or Lazuli from the graveyard to add our Gem Knight Fusion back to our hand. So essentially, we used up 3 cards and we got 3 cards back. So that's what makes this deck so good at fusion summoning. Essentially, moving resources from your hand onto the field instead of investing them into a single fusion monster. And that's what makes this deck so potent at just making play after play after play and overwhelming your opponent. So they're essentially the basic fusion mechanics of the deck, and that's just what makes the deck so good and just a huge amount of fun to play. Okay, so the next thing I want to explain is why I am main decking 3 Denko Sekka. So Denko Sekka, if you're not familiar with the card, while you control no set spell or trap cards, neither player can set spell or trap cards or activate spell or trap cards that are already set on the field. and this deck will never set spell and traps. So essentially, when you start off your turn, you're just going to go ahead and normal Denko Sekka if you have it, and any back row your opponent has is locked down immediately. They just can't do anything with it now. They have absolutely no way of using their back row. Unless they have a Solemn Warning to stop the summon of Denko Sekka, that's essentially pretty much the only thing that's going to be able to stop this from locking their back row down. Now, the reason you main deck 3 of them in Gem Knights, especially builds like this that spam fusions, this deck cannot deal with back row. It really can't deal with back row. It doesn't want to deal with back row. The resources you have, you want to invest in clearing your opponent's monsters and attacking for game. So that's one of the main reasons you just don't want to deal with back row. On top of that, your normal summon will pretty much never go to anything else except maybe a Gem Armadillo if you don't have access to the Denko Sekka or you need to summon this to make plays. So that makes Denko Sekka even better in a deck. You just really are pretty much never going to use up your normal summon except for maybe an Armadillo. But again, on top of that, it just keeps getting better and better. You can use Denko Sekka for 2 different fusion monsters. So because it's both a light attribute and a thunder type, you can use it to fuse into either Prismatic or Seraphonite. So Seraphonite requires a Gem Knight and a light attribute, and Prismatic requires a Gem Knight and a thunder type. So even when you draw multiples, it's never going to be dead. It's always going to be used for something, whether it be locking your opponent's back row down or making a fusion. So they are kind of the main reasons why 3 Denko Sekka is absolutely mandatory in Gem Knight builds like this. Without question, 3 Denko Sekka. It is just the fucking MVP of this deck. I have won so many games because of Denko Sekka. It is definitely needed at 3, especially against matchups that run any kind of back row. Even against one back row, you just don't want to deal with that back row. So locking it down is just incredibly key to just going straight for that OTK, which is what this deck does. So 3 Denko Sekka, once again, without question, you need to run 3 Denko Sekka. Okay, so I figured the next thing I would explain is the Glow Up Bulb. So of course, Glow Up Bulb is going to be used for making your Naturia Beast first turn, because this deck just doesn't have a whole lot of first turn plays, and against certain matchups, making Beast is just an absolute blowout, essentially an auto win. Now, access to the Glow Up Bulb isn't too difficult. Of course, you have the Glow Up Bulb itself, which there are combos I will explain in a second that you can use it with if you have it in hand, but you also have the Foolish Burial and the 1-for-1, which you can use to gain better access to the Glow Up Bulb. You have a whole bunch of level 4 Earth monsters in the deck, so whether it be one of your vanillas or the Gem Armadillo, so that's not too difficult in terms of matching up the numbers and attributes for materials. But on top of that, what's really cool is that the Foolish Burial and 1-for-1, if you are, going second and you don't need access to the Glow Up Bulb because you're just trying to OTK, they can also work with Lazuli, because you can Foolish Burial Lazuli and use the effect to get back an extra material from grave, or you can 1-for-1 for Lazuli and then fuse with it on the field and get back an extra material and extend your plays like that. Now, making the Naturia Beast first turn is, of course, a really, really good play, and it's actually fairly consistent in the deck as long as you just get, access to the Glow Up Bulb. What makes the Glow Up Bulb really, really good, in my opinion, is actually being able to make Beast and Barkion first turn, which isn't hugely difficult. Now, that's simply done with a 2-card combo, which just requires Glow Up Bulb and Brilliant Fusion. You can also use Brilliant Fusion and 1-for-1 if you want to do it that way. But I'm just going to show you the basic combo using these two if you happen to go first and you get these two. So you're going to start off by activating your Brilliant Fusion, and you're going to go ahead and send a Lazuli, a level 4 vanilla, and just any other vanilla generally, just to sort of load up your graveyard. It doesn't really matter which. And you're going to send all 3 of those for Lady Brilliant Diamond. Your Lazuli is going to activate in grave and let you add back your level 4 vanilla, so that's now in your hand. You're going to then use the Lady Brilliant Diamond effect on herself to send her to the grave to summon out Seraphonite. Now, Seraphonite is going to give you that extra normal summon, so you can normal summon, and then sync with the Glow Up Bulb and the vanilla for Naturia Beast. You can then use the Glow Up Bulb's effect in the graveyard to mill a card, summon it, and then you have a level 5 Earth right here with Seraphonite. You can then sync up into Barkion. So that's not too bad for a first turn play, especially if they can't deal with the beast and they're just kind of forced to set 1 or 2 back row. The Barkion is going to be really, really good in that scenario because you actually are going to have quite a few cards in grave after doing all of those plays. You're going to have at least 3 negations with the Barkion, which is really, really nice. So that's one of the first turn plays you can make in this deck. It's not too difficult to do, especially because you have a lot of dig cards in the deck. You have your Desires, you have your Upstart, you have your 1 Day of Peace. Again, you have the 1-for-1, and even if you can't make the Barkion with this play, you can still make the Naturia Beast with quite a few different ways. You don't have to get Foolish Burial and a level 4 Earth. There are actually quite a few other ways utilizing the fusion monsters that help you make this. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to show you that combo because it's a lot of fun when you get it off. Just being able to spit out these 2 guys first turn is really, really nice. Naturia Beast also has a little bit of synergy with the deck. In terms of what it can mill, because if you do mill for its effect, there's a possibility you can mill Gem Knight Fusion, which has happened to me quite a few times, and if you don't have access to this, that's really, really nice, because that then goes to grave and you have access to it. But anyway, yeah, that's just a really, really fun combo to do first turn if you happen to draw into it, especially against, you know, certain matchups, because the beast is just going to be a blowout, and if their only way to deal with this is through something like a Breakthrough Skill, or a Lost Wind, or a Mirror Force, then the Barkion's going to sort that out, which is really, really nice. So the next card I want to cover, which actually I forgot to mention in the previous segment when I talked about digging cards, is White Elephant's Gift. So if you're not familiar with White Elephant's Gift, send 1 non-effect monster you control to the graveyard to draw 2 cards. So it's as simple as that. Now what makes this card so good in the deck, besides the fact that you have so many goddamn targets for it, you can actually bring out all of these really, really easily with Obsidian. So if you fuse with Obsidian and one of your vanillas, and you just don't need the vanillas for anything else at that point, and you want to dig, you can just dig, because this specials them out onto the field. So it's nice that you just are able to special these out so easily with Obsidian and just send them for 2 cards. It really, really is helpful. On top of that, though, what's actually quite interesting is that notice that this says send 1 non-effect monster to the graveyard to draw 2 cards. You don't have to send a vanilla, right? So you don't have to send a normal monster. Why is that so good? Well, you have Zirconia in the extra deck, and Zirconia, although non-effect fusion monsters aren't normal monsters, it's still a non-effect monster. So because it says non-effect monster and not normal monster, you can use it with your Zirconia. So if you really want to dig for something like a Denko Sekka because your opponent has a bunch of back row, you don't have to waste your normal summon to summon out one of your main deck non-effects. You can actually just fuse for Zirconia and send him to the grave to try and dig for that Denko Sekka or whatever cards you might need. So all of that really does come together just to make this card so good in the deck. So yeah, if you're going to run Gem Knights, definitely consider this card. It's just excellent at extending your plays and, you know, really giving you that edge to dig, because this is definitely a combo-centric deck. There are a lot of combo pieces you want to see to really make the most of your turn. So yeah, the more dig cards, the better, and if they have as much synergy as White Elephant's Gift, then absolutely you want to run them in the deck. Okay, so pretty much the last thing I want to cover about my build of the deck here is why I'm running so many Gem Knight Fusion monsters. I'm running basically every single Gem Knight Fusion monster that you can run. Now, a lot of people might see this as gimmicky, and a lot of builds I see of Gem Knights try to focus on Xyz plays. But I think that the strengths of this deck, as I mentioned sort of right at the beginning of the explanation segment here, is fusion summoning, without question. That's the strength of the deck. You can continuously fusion summon over and over again, and having a lot of plays in one turn is actually really crucial this format because there's quite a bit of interruption going around. So focusing on that strong point with Gem Knights, in my opinion, is something that most people should take more of a look into. So the reason that I'm focusing so much on fusions is because I can make so many in a turn that I want as many options as I can to deal with certain problems. I know a lot of people are going to look at it as gimmicky, but if you actually go through and read every single Gem Knight Fusion monster's effects, they're all actually very good. None of them are bad. And in most scenarios, a lot of the Gem Knight monsters' effects, the Fusion monsters' effects, actually replace Xyz monster effects in particular situations. So for example, if I need to remove a card on the field, I can use something like Prism Aura. So Prism Aura, you can send 1 Gem Knight card from your hand to the graveyard to target 1 face-up card on the field, destroy that target. So that right there is just really good spot removal. So in a lot of cases where Castell might be useful, this can also be useful. A similar effect can come from something like Aquamarine. So if Aquamarine is sent from the field to the graveyard, target one card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. So again, sort of similar to Prismatic, this is just really good spot removal, but it can also be similar to Castell in the fact that it doesn't destroy. If you need something like a Gagaga Samurai, Topaz can replace that. He has 18 attack and he gets 2 attacks each battle phase. What makes Topaz a little bit different from Samurai, and a little bit better in my opinion, is that if he destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, he burns your opponent for the original attack of that monster in the graveyard. On top of that, a lot of the Gem Knight Fusion monsters have effects that you can't even really get from any Xyz monster. Seraphonite, probably the most popular Gem Knight right now, can get you the additional normal summon, which can be really useful in certain combos, like I mentioned with the Beast and Barkion, but also if you have a Gem Armadillo and a Denko Sekka in your hand, you can just get both off like that. So you can get an extra fusion material with Gem Armadillo, and you can lock down your opponent's back row with Denko Sekka. Lady Lapis Lazuli can burn your opponent for 500 for each special summon monster on the field by sending a Gem Knight from the extra deck or main deck to grave. If you need something like a Utopia the Lightning, for example, although this deck can't quite produce something as good as that with just the fusions, you can kind of make a pseudo Lightning. So if you can get Citrine in the graveyard, so Citrine is simply an Armades. If it attacks or is attacked, your opponent can't activate cards or effects till the end of the damage step. If you need some more attack points but still need your opponent to not activate anything when you attack, you can get that in the graveyard somehow. There's a lot of ways to do that. And then you can banish Citrine from the graveyard with Master Diamond for Master Diamond's effect, which will copy Citrine's effects. So you can then have a 2900 monster that basically can just bat over something without, triggering its effects. And if you're thinking, well, what about a Crystal Wing, for example? You need to deal with a Crystal Wing. That's not enough to deal with a Crystal Wing because, it's 2900. That's not big enough. Well, if you need to deal with something like a Crystal Wing, you can actually just go ahead and use the aforementioned Aquamarine, but you can fuse Aquamarine with something like an Obsidian or a Lazuli, because you then get Aquamarine's effect as Chainlink 1 since it's a mandatory effect, and you can get your Lazuli or Obsidian's effect as Chainlink 2. Your opponent then can't negate this, so they're going to lose their Crystal Wing and they have to negate one of these. So there are a lot of different ways in this deck using the fusion monsters to deal with problems that you're going to casually... That's not... Get out of there. Castell, you're not a fusion monster, you fucking... So there are just a lot of ways to deal with problems using just the fusion arsenal that this deck can provide. And again, there are a lot of additional effects that you can get from these that you just can't get from Xyz monsters. I hope that kind of explains my reasoning to you guys on why I'm running so many of these. It's not to be gimmicky, it's not to be like, oh, I have a character deck or anything like that. I genuinely do have a competitive mind, and in my eyes, just running so many of these provides you with just so many options when it comes to making a bunch of plays in a turn. It just helps you deal with certain boards. Another reason why I'm running so many fusion monsters is because I'm running Absorb Fusion at 3. A lot of people will run this at 2 or even 1, or maybe not even run it at all in very Xyz heavy builds of the deck, but I like the consistency of the card. Now, if you're not familiar with it, it lets you add 1 Gem Knight card from your deck to your hand, so that gives you access to all of your Gem Knight monsters in the main deck and also your Gem Knight Fusion. The only downside to that is that you can only activate one of these per turn, and also the turn you activate it, the entire turn, so not just afterwards, you can only special summon Gem Knight monsters, meaning that it limits you to your fusions. Or Gem Knight Pearl, but you don't even run that in the deck, just don't even consider it. Now, I really like having the consistency of running 3 of this card, and that's, again, another reason why I run so many of the fusions, because I don't want to be limited in what I can deal with and what effects I have access to, just because I want to run 3 of this for consistency. So that, again, is the reason why I run so many Gem Knight fusion monsters and so many different ones, just because I like having access to all those different effects that can deal with so many different problems on the board. And that was my Gem Knight deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I've been meaning to make this for so long now. I really didn't cover everything there is to know about Gem Knights in this video because a lot of the fun of playing a new deck comes from discovering those combos and discovering those little shortcuts to make more efficient plays on your own. I just kind of wanted to cover the basics of my build in this video, and if you haven't tried Gem Knights, absolutely give them a shot. They are a blast to play, very consistent and very fun deck. The deck also allows for a lot of tech cards as well, so definitely try out a lot of the generic fusion support cards out there. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and duel on.